And good morning, everyone. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler, who has one more day of vacation. It's a Tuesday morning. Christmas is over, December the 26th, 2023, and we got the gift of snow this morning. I don't think this was expected. There's a lot of snow outside. Roads are really rough, so it's one of those. I know a lot of people have today off or have taken today off, but December the 26th, 2023, mark it down. It may be a rough commute this morning. So good morning, everyone. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. We have this one. It says AM snow, cloudy and 44. We'll see what happens. 31 degrees tonight, 47 on Wednesday, and Thursday mostly sunny, 49 degrees. It's good to be here. Billy Thorpe's got the con. 303-696-1971. Two things that one of them is a show topic that I've thought about for several weeks, and I think today would be a good morning to talk about it. And the other is asking yourself, are we getting walked into another war? The United States, as you know, they've done strikes. The strikes were against the Iranian-backed militants following these missile attacks. The ballistic missile attacks resulted in these non-serious injuries to U.S. and coalition forces. But immediately following the attack, the U.S. military AC-130 gunships conducted self-defense strikes. Now, we've talked about what's called tripwire wars. And the late historian and brilliant historian, Barbara Tuchman, wrote extensively about tripwire wars. And World War I was a tripwire. And one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And eventually you are in the middle of something that you did not intend to do. So as long as the United States has carrier fleets there and has soldiers on the ground and they're back inside of Iran again, what do you think? What are we watching happen? They're something that I've long learned to dub the war machine. And the drone attack on the Iraqi military base wounds 3 U.S. service members. Why are they there? Why are the service members there? And ask yourself, what was learned in Afghanistan? What was learned in Iraq? And in response, Joe Biden, after being briefed and holding a call with his national security team, this is what we're able to read this morning, ordered retaliatory strikes on 3 locations. I'm quoting that, utilized by Hezbollah and affiliated groups focused on unmanned aerial drone activities. And according to the U.S. Central Command, the retaliatory strikes on the 3, all located in Iraq, are conducted at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time and likely killed a number of Hezbollah militants. I'm reading that. What are you watching going on here? The Biden people are telling reporters to start reporting the economy in the right way. I love that one as well. That was an addendum. But the Iraq forces are now being struck. The other one I wanted to talk about is something I've worked on for a while, is banning books. And Billy and I were talking about it. The topic or the part of it that I wanted to talk about is we'll give you the books or give you some of the highlight books. I've read many of them. What have they done to me? What have they done to you? You've read these books. Book censorship is the removal, suppression, or restricted circulation of literary, artistic, and educational material. Banning is one of the most permanent and effective methods of censorship. Begins with a challenge and then progresses until the book is no longer available to any student in a school or a library or a district. And it's nothing that's new. Banning books goes back to the beginning of publishing. And books have been banned and been sidebarred. But how many of you, by a show of hands, read Catcher in the Rye? Billy, did you read it? Okay. Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, of course, on the list. Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Did you read it? I did. I read actually a lot of Mark Twain. A wave of book censorship is occurring, and the state of Georgia created the Georgia Literature Commission, and initially now looking at books, whether or not they want them in libraries or not in libraries. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, not as read as often, I think, today as was then. Billy, did you read Leaves of Grass? You did, okay. Did you read Huck Finn? Yes, okay. Origin of the Species, Darwin. A list of people, James Joyce, who, of course, writes Ulysses. Ernest Hemingway's on the list. Scott Fitzgerald's on the list. John Steinbeck's on the list. The Elmer Gantry. Anyone read Elmer Gantry? Lady Chatterley's Lover. I remember reading that. Let's see. I brought all this junk in to look at. School boards are now principally or frequently are now involved in litigations involving, they say, the rights of freedom. But I thought it was right to freedom to read. We mentioned Catcher in the Rye. We mentioned One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The event. How many of these books did you read? 303-696-1971. May 23rd, 2020, the Burbank Unified School District in California removed. Billy, did you read To Kill a Mockingbird? I did as well. The Adventure of Mice and Men, Steinbeck, of course. It is just amazing. Grapes of Wrath, one of the most powerful books, like I think I ever read, was Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Orwell's 1984 as a challenge up against it now. The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Did you ever read the manifesto, Billy? Okay, all right. Theodore Dressler's The Genius. So let me see. The list goes on. Robert Frost, Sinclair Lewis, Jack London. I read a lot of Jack London. Amy Lowell, Jack Reed, Ira Tarbell, one of my idols. Tarbell wrote the History of Standard Oil, one of the original muckrakers. Topic of Cancer, Henry Miller. That's a notorious book. However, I read it. Flowers for Algernon. That's just a great story. I read that. Let me see. I go on the second page. This is when the Roman Catholic Church is now involved in banning books. Origin of the Species. Well, of course they wouldn't like Charles Darwin. The Harry Potter series. I've never read any of them. So, Bill, you've read all of them. All of them. Okay. Is on the list. So Operation Darkheart is on the list. Mice and Men, Brave New World, To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm reading from different lists from different outfits. Catcher in the Rye shows up again. About To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know why To Kill a Mockingbird. And the Harry Potter books. And let me see what else is here. The Hunger Games. Never read any of them. The Hate You Give. I've never read that. Captain Underpants. I've not read. Billy's read it. I have not. So if you've read these books, I'd really like to have you tell me what they've done to you. What have these books done to you? So banning books, what do you think when you look at this and says there's a reason for all of this, what do you think it is? And I mean, I have my own personal beliefs, but more significantly is what are we being walked into in the Middle East? Do you support this? Because all I can see is a bad side of this. This morning, the United States strikes an Iranian-linked militia in Iraq in response to a drone attack. What have you learned from the United States involvement, whether it's in Libya against Gaddafi, whether it's what was done to Saddam. And I was listening to some people on Fox News still telling that lie. What about Iran? And what about Hezbollah now in Lebanon? We have carrier fleets there, and now they're doing strikes. And the great fear always was when an American gets injured, and then it escalates. And 3 Americans were injured, and now it escalates. So those are the 2 topics. It's open lines, 303-696-1971. A bunch of snow in the city. It's going to be take it easy. Peter Boyles 4, George back tomorrow. But I'm caught between the 2. Last night I began to read about what Joe Biden is doing, and everyone asks the question: Is it really Joe Biden making these calls? But the U.S. strikes launched U.S. strikes targeting sites used by Hezbollah, Shia armed groups. The strikes were a response. Do you understand? I mean, I'm sure you do, the concept of a tripwire. And how deep does it have to go? And the U.S. Central Command is talking about destroying targeted facilities and killing several Hezbollah fighters. But I love the addendum, but we didn't kill any civilians. I'm so over that we're not killing civilians. The strikes are the latest indication of how Israel's war in Gaza is spreading through Middle East, and there's widespread outrage over the mounting Palestinian death toll. Over the weekend, there were many demonstrations against Israel. The Palestinian officials say more than 20,674 people have been killed, 54,536 have been wounded since October 7th, when the Palestinian group Hamas launched that horrible attack on southern Israel. The revised death toll from the Hamas attack, in terms of how many Israelis were killed, they give a number of 1,139. The U.S. officials have reported 103 attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria since mid-October. You know that the war machine wants this, or at least I believe the war machine wants this. The war machine wanted Bush and Cheney to do what they did. The war machine has always wanted these things. And so here we stand again. Baghdad, and I'll read you the headline from Al Jazeera. Baghdad condemns strikes that killed Iraqi security forces and wounded 18 as hostile acts. Now, I just watched a couple of Congress people appear on Fox News screaming, it's not enough. We need to do more. I'm thinking to myself, what have you learned? So help me out here, 303-696-1971, Billy Thorpe and Peter Boyles. And we have 2 things going on. The banned books, have you read any of them? I've read many of them. And did they affect you? That's the part that I'm really mostly concerned about, is what are these people worried about? What may perhaps you can tell me what you would worry about for some. Kids can't read in again over their heads. One of the things that I was always a reader, and my parents, at least my mother, who I don't even think controlled anything. Just if you wanted to read it, read it. That was her attitude towards us. If you wanted to read this book, read this book. You can't go read things that you can't comprehend. So if you're in the 7th or 8th grade or whatever grade level you're in, this is my opinion, that you're not going to go and read something that you can't understand. You're not going to read something that doesn't make sense to you. And you'll just leave it alone. The Catcher in the Rye. Ken Kesey's book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. One flew east and one flew west, and one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I had the opportunity to spend a couple of hours with Kesey on the radio, and we talked about it. And he did another book that I've always thought was almost a better book called Sometimes a Great Notion. And we talked more about that book than we did about Cuckoo's Nest. And remember, he becomes the merry pranksters and all the stuff that Kesey does. But so censorship against that, how many, show of hands, how many of you read Cuckoo's Nest? And what did it do to you? I don't get that. The Catcher in the Rye, which is kind of hackneyed now, but I read Catcher in the Rye. I don't think it affected me or in any other way than you just read it. Okay, fine. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I know why everybody's down on Mark Twain. It's because portrayal of slaves and former slaves. And they openly use the N-word in the book. And if you can't get past that, then, I mean, it's great literature. And was reading about the, which shows you I got to get a life, the Apostle Paul. And Paul is used today by certain parts of organized religion to suppress women, sometimes to suppress homosexuals. And this guy writes about Paul, and he's a fairly good historian. He says Paul was simply a man of his time. Well, we've talked about men of their time. And in the Mediterranean world where Romans, Hebrews, I mean, everybody treated women that way. They subjugated women. So Paul's no different, really, than all the people around him, Greeks, Romans, Hebrews, others. So today, Paul would have not fit in terms of those beliefs. We have said that about so many people. Christopher Columbus was a man of his time. And to force Columbus into 2023 is dead wrong. Same thing is true with these books. Understand who Mark Twain was. And it doesn't change anything. You're expecting Mark Twain to be a 2023 writer. The Huck Finn, similar use of vulgar language and the anti-traditional worldviews that we in political correctness hold today. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. So come on, jump in, 303-696-1971. I can hear the plows outside, plowing the parking lot. It is snow and it is cloudy out there, but the snow is here with us. And it was unexpected. I don't think anybody saw this one coming, but we got good snow this morning. Tuesday morning, snow in the city, December the 26th. I'm Peter Boyles, in for Vacationing George Brauchler, 303-696-1971. Banned books. Have you read them? How did they affect you? I just finished that lengthy book on Elon Musk, and it affected me. It affected me on how Musk thinks. I'm reading a book now on how Jeff Bezos, when he buys the Washington Post, and Bezos buys it from the Graham family, and what happens next up to then when the war begins with Donald Trump and why. It's a great read. Books do affect you, but I haven't seen anything here on these lists of books. Cuckoo's Nest, Ken Kesey's Cuckoo's Nest. The censorship of Ken Kesey. How many of you guys really seriously have read Ken Kesey? I mean, I read both Kesey books, both books that I'm aware of. I read Cuckoo's Nest, and then I read Sometimes a Great Notion. Other books that come with it. On the list is the Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And they want those books gone all the time. Read the Manifesto. Why would you not want to? To Kill a Mockingbird. Roll of Thunder. These are books on the banned list. Stock the books and hide on to them. Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer. There's a book. I remember reading it, but thinking, this is not a great book. Robert Frost, Sinclair Lewis. I'm a huge Sinclair Lewis fan. Jack London, The Call of the Wild. And Jack was not as you know, Jack was a sports writer as well. And he wrote some nasty stuff about Jack Johnson. And, in terms of him being the first black heavyweight champion of the world. And Jack London did not want to tolerate that. And so as the story goes, he actually, sitting ringside when Jack was beating someone, he would lean over the ropes. He would talk to Jack London, saying called him Mr. Jack. So how about that, Mr. Jack? Booth Tarkington, Ira Tarbell. I'm amazed at that. All right, let's get this party started. We got snow in the city. Diane, thank you for calling the radio show. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to call and express my disapproval of the banning of books like that. So ridiculous. I grew up with, I read To Kill a Mockingbird 5 times,
Sure.
because I liked it so much. And a lot of the other books, they were all on my brother's reading list, so I read them all too. And, they were just great books.
Yeah.
And how could anybody ban them? I don't know.
Well,
this is Gunga Din. I'm the one that recited Gunga Din to you a couple months ago.
You and I did. We could do that together. I remember you doing that.
Okay.
Great. I can still do Gunga Din too.
Me too. I just love it, and I learned that too as a child.
But now you see, and now of all the people, he was the white man's burden. He underwrites the need for the British to be imperialist in the world. So they catch him for that, but he still writes these epics.
Right, absolutely.
And I'm like you. I mean, so how did those books affect you?
Well, I think they, made me more aware of the culture of that time, and also the ability to accept various nationalities and people, and to be more inclusive.
One of the, when you read the reasons for censorship, and I was gearing up to do this on a Saturday show, but this morning I thought it would work. There's a line in the reasons called unsuited for certain age groups.
Right.
Yeah. I'd never read anything that I thought, no, seriously. I mean,
that is so funny because, I just read what my dad had in our bookshelf, and my parents never said, "Oh, you can't read that," or "You shouldn't read that," and also, and I even went to Catholic schools, and we read Tom Sawyer, and I remember it was a big green hardback book in my parents' bookshelf. And that was Tom Sawyer, the Tom Sawyer I read.
And I read Huck Finn, read Tom Sawyer.
Me too.
Yeah, and
I love that. Yeah.
All right, so I'll do the first line, you do the second line. Ready?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
You can talk of gin and beer.
Oh, yeah.
When you're quartered safe out here.
And
you're sent to penny fights and alders shot at.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to slaughter, you do your work on water. Remember, that's Gunga Din. It's the beginning of Gunga Din.
Right. Yeah. Right. What I knew was, I shan't forget the night when I dropped behind the fight with a bullet where me belt plate should have been. That's the the first lines I recall.
And I'll be squatting on the coals, giving drink to. No, he'll be squatting on the coals, giving
Right.
drink to poor damn souls, and I'll get a drink in hell from Gunga Din.
Gunga Din.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that
Yeah.
poem so much.
I like Robert Sargent. I just got into reading that stuff when I'm little.
I was so young too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned this when I first recited Gunga Din to you,
Mhm.
that I came out and my parents were having a party, and I was just like, really young,
Mhm.
9 or 10, and I recited Gunga Din to them.
Mhm.
And that was so funny because, it's kind of a
No, it's
it's not something you think
it's
of a little girl reciting.
no, and it's also, it speaks about the British Army being in. As a matter of fact, he's in India because he says an India's sunny clime, where I used to spend me time, serving of Her Majesty the Queen. So it's Queen Victoria, I'm sure,
Yes.
and they're the British
Yeah.
Army, and they're in India.
Right. Oh yeah, he was really big into that.
Yeah. So no, and I read that stuff. Did you ever read Flowers for Algernon, which is that?
Oh yes,
That's
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I love that
Mhm.
book. Drove me to tears. That
Yeah.
was just so great.
Well,
Yeah,
the book has been removed from school
banned.
libraries.
I
And
know it.
yeah.
That is so ridiculous. And I am, I went to a Catholic school. I remember Sister Joachim,
Mhm.
who was a librarian, and going into the library, and she would bring me out, books like that,
Well,
and say, "Here,
the
try
church,
this one."
one of the great banners of books has been the church.
That's ridiculous.
And
Bad.
but the Catholic Church has always not always banned, and there's Darwin is banned, and there's.
Well, I guess I went to a progressive.
I'm sure you did.
Catholic
Or
schools.
you had the right sister, one or the other, but the
Yeah, that's true.
So why do you think it's happening? And it's happening. What I was saying to Bill that we were talking before the show started. There's a squeeze from both sides. There's a squeeze from the progressive left, and there's a squeeze from the right, and it has to do with, I think, academia, or at least has to do with who gets to run curriculum and who gets to say this or who gets to say that. And it's
something screwed up.
It's happening.
Really screwed up.
You're a good call. Yeah. Thank you for being
you.
First. You're welcome. All right, 303-696-1971. The other topic is we're watching this happen again in the Middle East, where they're attacking the Iranians, and we are attacking the Iranians. There is such a thing called a tripwire. Where is it coming? And let me read this to you. Peter, concerning the war in the Middle East, I thought about 8 or 12 weeks ago, the United States should bomb the facilities on KARG Island. I would totally eliminate any possibility of Iran. I see where Iran's selling oil. Then I would tell the mullahs that you're next. But the United States military is led by a bunch of cowards, walkers, and people who are a lot more interested in gays and trannies than they are protecting the United States of America. Please call the show. All right. 44, ton of snow. Be careful. Lines are open. 303-696-1971.
Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Prospero año y felicidad.
The governor of Colorado. Good morning, everyone. December the 26th, I'm Peter Boyles in for George. Snow in the city. Roads are rough, but that was unexpected. 710 KNUS, thank you for being here. The weather forecast went like this, I think, before things changed. 44 will be the high today. We'll see 31 tonight, 47 on Wednesday, but the plows are outside and the roads are not good. Billy and I were talking about that's Governor Polis. And I'm thinking, who lets this guy do this stuff? I don't know what the purpose of it was. Maybe it's many different approaches, but the guy, Billy and I were talking about it. I don't know if the guy has a PR team or not, but who let him do that?
Yeah, who did? The idea being that when you go and you do karaoke night at the bar, they have music behind you.
Yes.
they have musical accompaniment because odd. This is a really weird thing, but most of us are not good singers. Most of us suck, myself included. And the idea of coming to the governor and saying, and I'm going to play this again, saying, hey, I have an idea. How about you do Jose Feliciano without musical accompaniment? And when you do that, you get this.
Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad.
Yeah, they got little bells in the background there.
Feliz
But
Navidad, prospero año y felicidad.
you couldn't spring for the karaoke version of it. You couldn't. What's the budget like? I mean, we can't pay the cover charge to play the Jose Feliciano music. We have nothing. The governor's office doesn't have the budget to make sure they can clear the song. What is going on here? And who said also the thing? He does a little jazz handy weird TikTok thingy at the end. Like who designed this? Who did this and said, hey, governor, this is going to be a great idea. But the thing that kills me is the lack of accompaniment for music. He can't carry a tune. We know this. I can't carry a tune. I know this. I'm not singing solo. Just come on, people. How are you this dumb?
It's getting national attention, too.
And it should.
Yeah,
it
should.
I love some of the comments were cringeworthy. It is more than cringeworthy. It is, oh, God. This is the kind of thing that if you want to embarrass your teenage kids, this is what you do. Yeah. You put it on their social media sites. Hi, kids. And you do this. Your kids are going to be forever shamed. This is ridiculous. I feel shamed as a state because he did this. I feel like one of his teenage kids and he shamed us. One more time. We got to go back. This is just.
No, one more.
Feliz Navidad.
Oh, my Lord.
Feliz Navidad.
It's not even the right music in the background.
Feliz Navidad, prospero año y felicidad.
I mean, they put music back there, but they just got bells. I mean, you couldn't even get the right song. Come on, idiots. Try hard. Really, I did. I feel shame. Here in Colorado, I'm going to hang my head in shame. I'm going to be quiet now in the corner and just hang my head in shame.
303-696-1971. Talking about two things. One is the beginnings, I think, of what we do not want to do in terms of U.S. foreign policy, the strikes against the Iranian-backed militants, and we are now close to a war. They're called tripwires. And it was something that, again, was pointed out by Barbara Tuchman, the Guns of Autumn and the Guns of August, and then she marched to Folly, and she would talk about how one thing led to another. World War I is a tripwire war. Are we walking into yet another tripwire? And a lot of things to read, but then and Billy and I were talking off air and on air about the other topic of the morning, banning books. What's the purpose of it? And so Billy, come back with me. So we have a more extensive list of books. Check if you read these. So Gatsby, that's why I had to look up and say, why were they after Scott Fitzgerald? And Gatsby is being challenged because of language and sexual references in the books. Catcher in the Rye, the classic. It's a favorite target of censors. And so Catcher in the Rye appears on the list. a separate piece. John knows his book. I know this book. Naked Lunch, which is, like, I understand, you got to go to a certain level before you understand Burroughs, but found obscene. Brideshead Revisited, of course, that's another one. D.H. Lawrence, Women in Love. Again, I've never read that book, so I have no take. The Satanic Verses, Salman Rushdie, is prominent on the list of books being banned in this country. And I think that's political correctness as well. Sophie's Choice, powerful book. Read that. Sons and Lovers. I'm not a D.H. Lawrence guy, so I never read D.H. Lawrence, but understand what Lawrence writes about. Cat's Cradle, Kurt Vonnegut. I actually met Kurt Vonnegut and we talked. He was more interested in his daughter had been married to a certain Fox News person, and they were not pleased with the outcome of that. But Cat's Cradle, anything by Vonnegut, seems to have been hitting the high notes. Grapes of Wrath. I'm stunned by that, by the Grapes of Wrath. It's one of the more powerful books and does affect you. That book does affect you. To Kill a Mockingbird, they came up again. Harper Lee's classic. And then she does a book later called To Set a Watchman. And you get a whole other view of Atticus Finch. But that book, To Kill a Mockingbird, is a very powerful book. The Color Purple makes the list. Why? Ulysses, James Joyce. You have to be able to understand it to read it. That's just Beloved, Toni Morrison's book, Beloved. I've not read it. Lord of the Flies. Did you read Lord of the Flies, Billy? Sure. Did it affect you? It did. Yeah. And some of these books will obviously have, will affect you. Let's see what else is here on my list. But there's, we mentioned Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell. Sun Also Rises, Hemingway. Is that William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying, another one. A Farewell to Arms, Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. Gone with the Wind, Native Son, Richard Wright. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. Again, read the book. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Kesey, we've talked about it. Rabbit Run, John Updike, An American Tragedy, Theodore Dressler. Henry Miller, anything by Henry Miller. Naked and the Dead, Norman Mailer. Why? For Whom the Bell Tolls, Hemingway. Call of the Wild by Jack London. Go Tell It on a Mountain by James Baldwin. All the King's Men, Robert Penn Warren. Lord of the Rings. Billy said he's read all the Ring stuff. I have not read one. Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, Chatterley's Lover. A Clockwork Orange. In Cold Blood, Truman Capote. To me, read two things and then we got to turn around again. Let's see. This is how it always begins, right? Turn around into a parking lot. Oh, good. Polis does this crap because I won't read that. All right. It is Tuesday morning. Snows in the city, 303-696-1971. Where do you think U.S. foreign policy is headed vis-a-vis the Middle East? Are we walking into something? I think we are, and I think the outcome of this is not going to be good. Deeper they go, the more they're going to want it. I believe it's the war machine again, and book censorship. And I haven't mentioned all of them, but what have they ever done to you? Think about reading a book like the Kesey stuff. What did Kesey Flew Over the Cuckoo? What did that do to you? And they're gunning for Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind, because it's pro the Confederacy. It's a great novel. The film itself was always kind of left me alone, but I don't know. Real quick, one more, and then we'll take the pause. So what are they recommending you read? It's a better question. I don't know. but certainly I can give you the list of things they don't want you to read, and I'm asking you why. 303-696-1971. Are we walking into yet another war that has no end to it, that would drain more and more and more from the government and drain more of young Americans and cause more nations in the world to come back at the United States? Your turn. 44. We got a lot of snow in the city. 303-696-1971. Hang on. Right back after this. That little band from Texas, Tuesday, good morning, the day after Christmas, December 26th. Got a big snowstorm in the city, so be careful this morning. 710 KNUS, Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. 44 will be the high, according to the 710 KNUS Weather Center. And 31 will be tonight and 47 tomorrow. We taking a turnaround, Bill? That's a quick hour. Come back, 303-696-1971. A lot to read about on burning books people have sent to us. Banning, and of course, the burning took place in the 30s. Your turn right after this. Stay here. And good morning, everyone. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. George back tomorrow, Tuesday morning, December the 26th. Nothing flatter than the day after Christmas, is there? Christmas come and gone, December 26th. A lot of snow in the city. Roads are rough, so take your time. 303-696-1971. It is 710 KNUS. You heard the weather, but the claim is it's going to be 44 for a high today. Let's see, 31 tonight, 47 Wednesday, and 49 on Thursday. Two topics. The front burner is the U.S. once again back in a war zone, back in a situation where now the attacks have begun, and now the U.S. is retaliating. Where are we headed, and what reason are we involved? Two aircraft carrier groups are there. A drone attack by Iran, Iranian-affiliated, I should say, terrorist group on a military base in Iraq early on Monday morning. 3 service members were wounded, and that prompts Joe Biden to order retaliatory attacks. Where are we headed? Once again, watching the senselessness of U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis the military. The other one is banning books, and I was going to do this as a Saturday show, but I thought to myself it would be a better topic for this morning. Why? And the banned books, what has come your way out of it? Let me read a couple, then we'll go to the phones. Why are they wanting to ban books? Well, again, what do you recommend? So what are they recommending you read? I don't know. And turn Iran into a parking lot. Well, all right, so we begin. Let's go to Ralph. Ralph, good morning. Thank you for coming on the show, and happy Tuesday.
Yeah, happy Tuesday. I think both of your topics are related, but it's a little difficult to make the connection. 3 of the books that you said were being banned: All of the King's Men, 1984, and Homer Gantry. Okay, All the King's Men is about Huey Long.
Absolutely.
Does that resemble someone in our politics today? Elmer Gantry is about someone who is, very, very Christian. But how shall I say? He sins on the side repeatedly. 1984 is about centralizing authority and having wars that last forever, as Big Brother needs a war to support him in order to stay in power. You see the connection?
Well, sure. I mean, but I don't think it's. I think you're giving it meaning that it. I mean, it could have. Obviously, don't misunderstand me. But
No.
like I further went out and searched during the pause. Brave New World, Catch 22, Animal Farm. They're all appearing on these lists. The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms, Hemingway, and that's an anti-war novel. Gone with the Wind, again, being stuck by that with Margaret Mitchell. It's pro the Confederacy. The Kesey books, Henry Miller. If you're a reader, Henry Miller, I don't know how much of Henry Miller you can handle, anybody, but the books are there. Rabbit Run, Updike's books. I look at this stuff and I think to myself, why? And those books, To Kill a Mockingbird. Somebody just sent me a text on To Kill a Mockingbird. Why would someone, Ralph and I always respect your calls. Why would someone want those books banned? And then one of the texters this morning said, and replaced with what? Which I don't have an answer for.
Well, see, that's your texter's question is right on point for what I'm saying. Look, all of those books encourage thinking.
Yes.
Go back to when we wrote the Constitution. Go back to the American Revolution. It was about the Enlightenment. What is the Enlightenment?
Sure.
Thinking.
Yeah. The Enlightenment begins in Europe, but
exactly. But we followed it.
Oh, absolutely.
And the question basically comes down to, okay, we have a government that is based on the Enlightenment. on people thinking for
allegedly.
themselves.
Allegedly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm not going to argue that with you,
right.
believe me. But allegedly, that is the theory of our government. It is a republic of people who think for themselves. And to think for yourself, you have to go look at the appendix to 1984 in George Orwell. Orwell is very explicit. You control people by controlling the meaning of words. Thus, the Ministry of, Information? You control the meaning of a word. Therefore, a person can only think using whatever, if you limit that word is within those limited channels.
Like I was going to say, like calling somebody a rhino, which seems to be the operative word. A rhino now means something that you do not believe Donald Trump won, and there's a couple other things that go with it. So then you automatically become a rhino. And words, and that's, I mean, it's really animal. Well, it's not so much Animal Farm as it is 1984.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, think about this. Who would be a rhino today? I'll pick Ronald Reagan as my first example.
Of course, you have Dwight Eisenhower. I'll give the examples.
Bingo.
Sure. They're rhinos.
Precisely. So now what we have is a group in the United States that's powerful, that is implementing the appendix 1984 by controlling the meaning of words and also by controlling the books that we can read so that our thought will not stray from the...
And
you got it.
And the fireman, I don't know if you remember the fireman, Bradbury's fireman.
Right.
What was
451.
What was his job? His job was to burn books.
Precisely.
And
because what you're burning is thought.
Yeah, and you can't allow for. I mean, it's the same thing. One of the 1933 when at places like Heidelberg University and places like there's a spot in Berlin that's marked where the books were burned, and it's scary to see that.
But
go ahead.
But Peter, look at where that comes from.
Sure.
I'm Czech related. Well, before you burned only books, you burned people.
Afterward, it's been said people that burn books will eventually burn people. But remember, they sing.
But it came burning people first, and I will note that the public executioner of many cities burned a whole bunch of books during the Counter-Reformation.
Well, but the library at Alexandria was burned, and allegedly, again, great thought was lost. But burning books or banning books is a step towards what? And to me, it's a very frightening topic of book censorship. And you would look at modern historians who would tell you that banning is one of the most permanent and effective methods of censorship. The challenge, and that progresses until the books are no longer available to any student in school, library, or in a district. And in many cases, the books are banned and petitioned to be banned by parents who are concerned about the material their children are reading. I'm not. I mean, in many of these books, and I started thinking about this, I was over the weekend and then prior been trying to set this up for the Saturday show, but I thought we'd spring it this morning. And I've read many, some of these books I've not, but I've read many of them. And how did they influence me, and how did they influence you?
Tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think,
but go ahead.
I was going to ask, did you ever try to read in over your head? Because when you attempt that, then you flop. But as long as you can understand it, when I read Animal Farm for the first time, I didn't realize it's Orwell's critique of the Soviet Union. The snowball is Trotsky and all of the things that
exactly
I didn't know that meaning, but I just thought it was like this very powerful novel for no, I'm serious, for for like an
No,
eighth.
what I'm laughing at is the side of the barn.
Yeah.
2 legs bad, 4 legs good.
Yeah.
Changes to 2 legs good.
Yeah. But everybody.
It's a question of meaning.
I mean, what was it in the end? That you can tell pig from man and man from pig. But
exactly.
But the Orwells, I mean, in Orwell, I mean, I'm a huge Orwell fan.
Oh yeah.
And he himself was a Marxist. He himself had gone to Spain, and his father was in the imperial government of Great Britain. And Orwell was a communist at one time of his life. But he makes enormous changes in himself. He goes to Spain to fight, and he starts to see for what it is. And I think he does 1984 first, which is he wrote it in 1948, and what he believed again was to flip the numbers, 1948 to 1984. But I remember reading Animal Farm without realizing that it was a parody.
Yeah, I can see that. But you used a word there, banning. And isn't rhino a means of banning some type of political thought?
Well, rhinos, and how screwed up the Republican Party is, and believe me, it's so.
I used to be one.
Yeah, it's beyond screwed. But, and they just jacket people they don't like and write letters against them, and it reminds me more of when the church is beginning the Renaissance, where you just took people.
Bingo.
And they're also the Republican Party is purging right now. There's tests that if you can't pass the test, then you have to be purged, and the Stalinist purges and everything. And I mean, purging, and it doesn't mean that you're killing people, although Stalin did. It just means you're getting rid of them, getting them out of your party because they can't pass the purity test. It's fairly simple. It's been done many times before.
Like I say, it's eliminating the Enlightenment.
Sure, yeah. So,
let me add one
more.
analogy.
Okay.
You let me go. One more. I have read, and I've seen it only in one source, that Orwell, when he was fighting with the Republicans as a communist in Catalonia, that Stalin or somebody in the hierarchy ordered his execution, and there was a, how do I want to say it? Someone from the old KGB that almost assassinated Orwell before he got out of Spain.
I've never read that before. The assassin, Trotsky's assassin, his assassin was related to the Spanish Civil War. It was one of the KGB guys that began an affair, and I think it's that woman's daughter or woman's son, not from the KGB guy, but it was and then he went to Mexico and murdered Trotsky with the ice axe. But that spins out of the Spanish Civil War as well as the murder of Trotsky. But
that's where it sort of purity spins to execution of your enemies.
But he's also Snowball. Trotsky is Snowball.
Absolutely.
And Animal Farm, yeah. And everything you can blame on why the farm doesn't work, you blame on Snowball. And everything Joe Stalin. No, I'm not serious. I mean, when they would find.
I'm laughing at and bring that forward to 2023. 2024.
Yeah. You scapegoat.
Anyway.
But and again, those trials took place, and they took place in Soviet Union under, it was the Great Fear, the purging. And I'm not saying this is Stalinist here, but it is also a purging that's taking place, that if you can't pass the purity test, the litmus test of the Republican Party, that's controlled by actually, when you think about it, it's a very small but a very vocal group that controls the Republican Party. And I think reasonable people just simply walk away. and say, no, I don't want anything to do with this. And maybe it returns, maybe it doesn't return. But to have the people that are calling the shots now, you're thinking to yourself, wow.
Peter, they're the vanguard of the plutocracy.
Well, again, vanguard parties are, the Bolsheviks were vanguards. They're to be watched. But I'm telling you, I watch this stuff and think how repetitive it is. The book censorship in our country. And then the other one is watching U.S. foreign policy. God, are we headed to a bad place? And I watch this stuff, and this could easily spring into something that these people have no idea what's headed their way. Okay, underway. Thank you. 303-696-1971. The banning of books. Catch-22, Heller's book, is on the list. Animal Farm, we just mentioned, on the list. Brave New World, Huxley's book. The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms, Hemingway. I don't know why they would be banned. They're truthful. And the list really does go on. It's a pretty extensive list. And it's intensified in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. But if banning is one of the most permanent and effective methods of censorship. And it begins with a challenge and progresses until the books are no longer available to any student in their school, library, or district. Same thing is true. Look, taking down statues, removing names, taking names off of buildings, taking statues down, removing things from curriculum. And that squeezes from the other side. And the quality of education, I think most of us, you kind of self-educate yourself. And when you read and when you find yourself that way, but remember in 1933, the members of the Hitler Youth regularly burned books that were written by Jews and liberals and left wing. It's kind of like a jump across. So in 1933, those famous pictures of those young Germans, hucking books onto the fire. And historians will look at censorship, back and see the church censor things principally. You cannot speak against the king, those kinds of things are censorship. But when you see the books that are on the list and realize, hey, you read these, or if you hadn't, you should have. Catch-22, Heller's book. Their Eyes Were Watching God. I've not read the book. It's on the list. Invisible Man, I read. Song of Solomon, Toni Morrison, I've not read, is on the list. Let me see, it goes, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mentioned that. And I spent time with Kesey. Richard Wright's Native Son, Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Ernest Hemingway, that's about the Spanish Civil War. Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut, there. I told you, I met Vonnegut. We sat and talked for quite a while. I'm a huge fan of Vonnegut. I don't know if I read everything he wrote, but I read a lot of it. The Call of the Wild, Jack London. Why? James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. I read that. All the King's Men, that was just mentioned. Robert Penn Warren, it's about Huey Long. Lord of the Rings, I've not read any of those. Billy's read all of them, which should say something. And have you read these? And what have they done to you? I mean, that's the part that I worry about. The Jungle, Upton Sinclair, about the meatpacking business in Chicago. I remember reading that. He changed a lot. Lady Chatterley's Lover. I read it, but I only read it because everybody said you shouldn't be reading it. So that's when I went and read it. Anthony Burgess's book, A Clockwork Orange. The Awakening. I've not read that, but I read A Clockwork Orange. In Cold Blood, Truman Capote's book. Read that more than once. And it's why? 303-696-1971. 44 will be the high. And the other topic this morning is watching U.S. foreign policy. We're walking into something, and this is hardly a wartime leader, Joe Biden. I don't know what's pressuring Joe to do these things, but when I tell you this is not going to end up in the right place, why? What has Joe Biden not learned? I'm just amazed, and we're watching the United States of America tripwire itself into something, and it's no way out. You find yourself in a similar situation. The drone attacks have continued. And why? They say, well, these young American soldiers, and I watched some congressperson on Fox News early this morning, we have to do more. We have to go back and get more of these terrorists and kill them. But you have to ask yourself, why are those 3 young GIs there? For what purpose are they there? Well, you didn't learn enough about Saddam and Bush and Cheney. You didn't learn enough about Afghanistan with Bush, and better yet, you didn't learn enough about Afghanistan after the Soviet Union was there. And I look at these people and I think, you have learned nothing. But are you doing this for the war machine? Is it something that just needs to be done, and to keep this country in a state of war? How long, how old are you, and how many wars has this country been involved in compared to your age? All right, 44 will be the high. Snow in the city, roads are tough. 47 Wednesday, your turn, 303-696-1971. Morning, everyone. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. Will be back tomorrow. It is a Tuesday, unexpected snowstorm in the city. Take your time. It's going to be tough going this morning. Snow in the city, December 26th, day after Christmas, 710 KNUS. Thank you for being here. 44 the high and 47 on Wednesday. Quick reading, and then we'll go to the phones. Book banning is a Marxist movement in this country to change our culture, similar to destroying the four olds. Yeah, I was going to say, Billy say, well, if you go back historically, totalitarians do it, including the church, banning books, and the Nazis, who are not communists, banning books. So you can go back to totalitarians, want to control thought. Back to the phones we go. We go to Sarah. Sarah, thank you for calling the show, and good morning.
Good morning. I don't believe in banning books either, but I was wondering, have you read The White Pill by Michael Malice?
I have not.
I would highly, highly recommend it, and I would recommend this book as a must-read for high school students.
What's it? Give me the book.
It's in reference to the Russian Revolution, and
why, if it's a Russian Revolution, why'd they dub it the White Pill?
Well, the White Pill, I'm just halfway through it.
Please.
It's so gut-wrenching that I have to put it down for a while and then get back to it. But I think the White Pill is a pill of hope.
Huh.
And it talks about the revolution, goes mainly in with Stalin, and how the West newspapers justify all this bloodshed and all this starvation. And like I said, it's very gut-wrenching, but I think it should be required reading for high school students, just like the Wild Swans or the White Swans. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was 3 generations of Chinese women all the way through the Mao Revolution. And again, gut-wrenching, very informative, not a difficult read because the writing is excellent. It just flows. But the knowledge that it brings out, and then the comparison of how our newspapers just justified
Well, there
everything.
were some papers that did and some papers that did not. And if you remember, at the time of the Bolsheviks, the Bolshevik Revolution.
That's where it starts. That's where this book starts.
But that was, obviously the Imperial German staff did what they did with Lenin. But the United States, actually, there's a military graveyard, I'm sure, people know, inside of Soviet Union. Everybody was trying to force into the into the Civil War, the whites versus the reds. But there were newspapers that supported it, but there were other newspapers that talked openly. And remember, they were not recognized at Versailles, and there was a lot of, to say that American newspapers.
Well,
not all.
That's right, but that's why I found it very interesting, and that's why I highly recommend it for all to read. And then they take quotes out of Ayn Rand where she says, it is almost impossible to convey to a free people what it is like to live in a totalitarian dictatorship.
And she's
because she was called to testify. And the Congress here, the people that were judging, they said, how can you be so negative about Russia? We know lots of Russian people, and they're very jovial, and they're very this, and they're very that. And that's when she says it's almost impossible to convey unless you live there. And then it goes through some of the anarchists here in America who were not citizens, and they take them over back to Russia. And they kiss the ground of Russian soil, but then they come to find out what it truly, truly is like, and then they leave.
It was called the Red Ark, and it was one of the first times you see J. Edgar Hoover, and they rounded up. Let's see who went. A lot of far left Americans, Emma Goldman was put on the Red Ark.
Correct. I think she was one of the people that were sent back. Yeah, and then they talk. They have her voice in this book also.
Sure.
So I would highly recommend it.
All right.
And
let me
it's called The White Pill.
Yeah, let me sidebar you for a second. And on this seemingly endless list of books that are now challenged and or banned in this country, many of them are modern classics, not the classics in the sense of the classics, but modern classics. Brave New World and Animal Farm. And
they even have a voice of George Orwell in this book.
And they do. Sure. Orwell was very important then. So it is important now. So
correct. But he started out as a real leftist also.
Oh yeah, sure. He went to Spain to fight.
Yes.
And that's where his mind was changed. He was wounded in his eye in Spain. I'm an Orwell geek, but and he changes his mind and becomes the critic. But come full circle, did any of these books? I mean, I don't know why people fear them. Can you give me? And I'm not trying to make it. I mean, why would you be afraid of Animal Farm or Brave New World or Catch-22? Why would anyone fear them?
Because it tells you like it is. It makes you think. And in when you're trying to pass a certain revolution or ideology, you can't have books like this around. You can't, because then you cause people to think. And then they see things that they weren't supposed to see. It's almost like a mind control. It also states that even in World War II, in the camps, you could almost make that glorified by talking about and creating love stories that were in the camp. So maybe it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
So that's the thought, and I think it's all. There's a reason for it, and I don't think it's a positive reason for blending.
You can see things. There was a series of films made entitled "Why We Fight," and they were made in Hollywood. They were made by some of the most brilliant American directors, and they did a lot of pro-Soviet stuff. North Star is one of those films, and the reason.
Oh yes, the media here. Oh yes, definitely.
But the reason was, and it was all approved by numbers of people, because the Soviet Union was taking the blunt of the war in Europe. I mean, the Nazis fought the Soviets, and so the United States. I mean, it was even guys like Winston Churchill who were really anti-communist, and he knew that they had to kiss Joe's derriere because they wanted him in the war, because at one time Stalin was losing 10,000 soldiers a day. Imagine that. But they took on the blunt of the Nazis. And
that's why they needed it, of course.
Of course,
but that's like the useful idiots. And so then afterwards, when they don't need them, but then if you still want to maintain that communism, let's say, or socialism, is the best form of government, and government is the best form for people, then you'll start you ban books.
Well,
because you can't have people think.
but it's interesting that when the history of it is, of banning books, there's all kinds of different organizations and or outfits, political movements that ban books. The Catholic Church is a great banner of books. The Nazis banned books, as you point out. The Soviets banned books. But now we're in this moment in this country where banning is taking place, or political pressure is taking place like a vice from the left side and from the right side. And it doesn't, neither of those end up in a good place. And
correct. And that's why you can't ban books, so that people can start thinking and comparing and seeing with their own eyes. I think you have to know your source, where you're getting your information from also.
Many places. I mean, I geared up for a couple of days to do this show, and I was going to do it on, believe it or not, on Saturday on book bundling, but it's better to do it today. But I'm a fan of Catch-22, Joseph Heller's novel, and
Me too.
why would that be on the list? And
do you have any ideas on why?
well, first of all, it's an anti-war book,
right, and I think that's the whole crux of it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just even for the Catholic Church, they wouldn't want
it isn't
people to leave.
It isn't the Catholic Church that's after Catch-22.
Right.
It's a school, and it's a school board. It's a school board that's after it.
Exactly, and then the school board. If you, I sometimes see where parents will bring books that they will that the school board is recommending for certain even elementary schools, and they can't even get in it. I think they're horrible. Personally, I don't care for them, and they have to stop the parent in the middle of a paragraph because it's so so. And that's not literature. That's not learning. That's indoctrination, I would imagine.
But when you watch Cornell University or watch the Ivy League schools, and my comparison is Heidelberg University in 1933 and 34 and 35, where that's where the banning took place, and where the horribleness that really gets its traction in the Nazis comes out of Heidelberg and places like Heidelberg. And if you look at what's happening, particularly in Ivy League schools, and you wonder, what is it that they're thinking? What is it that they're and they aren't they smart enough to see themselves historically?
No, they're too young. They have no.
Well, but someone should. Yeah, but
someone should.
Yeah, you can.
That's why this White Pill and still Animal Farm in 1984 and everything should be required reading. Still, I haven't kept up. What is required reading in high school today, but I sure hope there's some good literature.
I've been reading it. I mean, I've been a couple of days, and I made my list of things, just printed it off of the reasons for censorship. You're a wonderful call. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You be safe. Bill, where do we stand here? We got a break. Folks on the phones, please stay there. 303-696-1971. Two topics this morning: banning books. Have you read banned books, and how did they affect you? And then watching Joe Biden, are we headed into yet another war, in a full-scale war? With why? The war machine. What is happening? 303-696-1971. There's snow in the city. Be careful. 710 KNUS Denver's talk station. Morning, everybody. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. He's back tomorrow. I'm here Saturday as well. It's the day after Christmas, December 26th. Snow is in the city. Take your time this morning. 710 KNUS. They claim 44 to be a high. We'll see what happens. 31 tonight, 47 on Wednesday. Two topics. The one that's really picking up is book banning. And do you think, and this is one of the questions I said to Billy, we're talking during the pause, how do book bans impact students, or do they? Back to the phones. We go to Brian. Brian, you're on a radio show. Good morning, and thank you.
Hey, good morning, Pete. Hope you had a good Christmas.
I really did. Really had a great, thank you.
That's great. This whole book banning thing, it's just another step in, controlling people. And, these are the same people that will allow, pornographic can't read Brave New World,
Yeah.
And it kind of, I did my senior thesis on 1984, and that's back in the day when, we had to actually read the book, and you actually had to do research and note sites and all that stuff. And I really broke that book down, and it's scary how we're going there. And I'm not one of those where, we're gonna be there, but with the whole social media control and the whole, the government getting involved in stuff like this, and school boards banning books, it's eerily similar to stuff like that. And we pulled our kids out of public school a couple years ago during COVID, and one of the kids wanted to be a cat, and the school's okay with them being a cat. And it just, it was just insanity. So we pulled them out, and now my son's actually reading Animal Farm.
Yeah.
And they're learning about communism, and it's just, why don't they want us to read about these forms of government?
But it isn't just Animal Farm, although that's frightening to me because, as I said, I think I read it for the first time without realizing what Orwell was writing about. It was a parody of the Soviet Union. I read it as a novel and was intrigued by all of it. I didn't put it together until much later. Who was who? We're mentioning, Trotsky as Snowball and everything that goes with, the horse's name was, I forget the horse's name, but he's the kulaks. He's Ukrainian. They just take him out finally after all his hard work and just get rid of him. He actually goes to the slaughterhouse. And, this stuff, Brave New World, Huxley's book. I mean, these books affected me. And so I'm thinking, why doesn't somebody want some other kid to read Catch-22 by Joseph Heller? What would the point be? Brian?
Well, I think it's to control what we're able to think for ourselves and to read these books.
But who's banning Huxley? I mean, Huxley is being banned by conservative right, and then there's liberal left, progressive left. I mean, I see this as a vice that's being tightened up from both sides.
Yeah, I think both sides are trying to do this.
No, indeed, they are.
They are trying to control. It's kind of like the hard right religious factor too. They don't. They're just as bad as the left wingers that want to ban all this stuff, Pete. But we got to stand up against it. We got to be able to think for ourselves.
We're going to turn the corner. Thank you. Very good call. A lot of good calls. Hang on, everyone. Your calls are next. It's a Tuesday. I'm Peter Boyles. December the 26th. Brauchler's back tomorrow.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
And good morning, everyone. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. George back tomorrow. It is a Tuesday, the day after Christmas. Snow in the city. Woof. Careful. Driving is really rough right now. 710 KNUS weather says 44 for the high. I don't know. 31 tonight, 47 on Wednesday, and Thursday, 49 degrees. Two topics this morning. The one on banned books seems to be carrying through. The other one is watching U.S. foreign policy. And where are we headed? Watching, again, U.S. military strikes again inside the Iranian-based or backed militants following a missile attack. Where is Joe Biden taking us? And the books that have been banned, and have you read them? And we can go over them again and again and again, but how did they affect you? And let's go back to our phones. We go to Thomas's first. Thomas, good morning, man. Thank you. You're on a radio show.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I hope you had a great Christmas.
Great.
Anyway,
really good.
I know this is kind of out of the ordinary, but here we are talking about banned books like To Kill a Mockingbird, Catcher in the Rye. My daughter had her read about the Donner Party.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand we had parents back in Westfield, New Jersey, getting in front of the school board. We're not want our kids to learn about cannibalism and everything else. And I read the book, and for my daughter, and I went back and I said, I understand, but you're not in the middle of the Sierra Madres in the middle of winter with no food to eat. When you're forced to come up with some decision, why do you have to sit there and tell me that was the wrong decision when you're not in that position? But besides all that, my point is this. You got these people who are taking bestsellers, Pulitzer Prize winning authors, New York Times bestsellers, and they walk out and they use that colorful language that George Carlin used to put in his routine. And you sit there and say, wait a minute. I had a friend who wrote for their association for their development here in Colorado. And she said, I love cursing. I love yelling at traffic. M&F this, and BS this, and F-bombs here. And I said, but wait a minute, you write for your paper about, suppose some guy's dog poops on your lawn. Do you write that in your paper, that M&F and dog, keep it to your... No, she says, that would be terrible. I said, well, then why do you use it in regular language? So I'm wondering, all these people who are banning books, do they curse in front of their kids? I used to coach young kids, and my sister said, Tom, if you ever go and said that, you're going to be sued and yelled at. So I had to control my language for many years while I coach young kids.
A couple of things. I like what you said, first of all, but two, many of these books I'm familiar with, and they don't have that kind of language. You mentioned Animal Farm and 1984. They don't have those kinds of words.
I know,
and
that's what I'm saying. They're great novels.
Yeah. Well, what is? I mean, I wrote my worksheet I make, and I wrote on it. Have you read books that are on the list? And my answer is yes, many of them. And then asking myself, how did they affect you? And I think they made me smarter, or I don't know, smarter, but made me think differently. Maybe that's the fear, but but it is interesting who the banners are, because they come from both sides of the aisle. It is the right and the left, and it's the same thing watching the politically correct in our society today. They just cut things back, and I go back to years ago when they said all we really want is Stonewall Jackson, and now they got Kate Smith. And it's only no, I'm serious. I mean,
no, you're right.
So where do you think all of this is headed eventually?
I have always religious people come up to my door every now and then and want to sit down. And when I was younger, my mother and father would come back from Christian church, Roman Catholic church, and I'd be sitting around with all these people around the dining room table talking to them. And I'm a very kind of a logical person. I'd like to know things. And I'd always ask him, I said, what did Joseph do with the gold?
You're stretching it.
No, I know, but here's a poor carpenter who had to leave his profession, travel to unknown lands with his wife who was pregnant, can't even afford to get a room for her to have her child. So, and then all of a sudden, these three kings give him myrrh, frankincense, and gold. I said, I want to know what he did with the gold.
Well, most of that is mythology.
I understand that. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with. I'm not saying it's 100%, great, but I'm talking about books, and I know why they want to. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is such an excellent book. I mean, I love that. I loved Fahrenheit 454,
Sure.
1984, On the Beach. All these books made you think, and that's the greatest thing. I remember Spencer Tracy in Inherit the Wind. It's a think. Men have to think. People want to think and make a decision on their own, and that's why he said, "This is a thinking man. You're preventing him from thinking and coming up with thoughts." Like he said to the guy, does a sponge think? Why can't this guy think?
But again, the list, and it's lengthy, and it's gained.
It's going to gain momentum.
Yeah,
too.
It gains books. But I once again, I think that kids, or I should speak only for myself, I never went in over my head, because if I couldn't understand it, there was no purpose for me to read it. And so as I come back to Animal Farm, when I first read Animal Farm, I don't know how old I was, but it was like this novel that I didn't understand who Orwell was talking about. The novel in and of itself was brilliant, with the animals taking over, getting rid of the farmer, and and then running their own commune. And in the end, the pigs are dressed like men, which is what Orwell says about the party itself. And they are, they said from man to pig and pig to man, and I can't, but you couldn't tell the difference. And then we knew that some animals were equal, but some animals were, in fact, more equal. I didn't put that together until I started studying and reading about Soviet Union, and then reading about Orwell, and reading why Orwell did what Orwell did, because he's critiquing everything that he witnessed. And now it makes even more sense, or makes the sense of what Orwell was writing about. But 1984 is just a very frightening book to me when I first read it. And then I realized where it was being aimed and what it was being aimed at. So now like I said, the list of books on this list, and asking yourself, what are the reasons to do this? What are the reasons for censorship? I personally don't get it.
Right. I don't either. And like you, it took me till I was a sophomore in college before I understood what Animal Farm was all about.
No, indeed. Until you got somebody who said, well, I didn't probably know when I was that old who Trotsky was. Yeah. I didn't know, about purging. I didn't know that stuff. And then until, oh man, and then the light goes on when you realize Snowball's Trotsky, or Trotsky's Snowball.
Exactly. I was listening to you, and I said, yeah, he's absolutely right.
Oh, absolutely.
I read it when I was a sophomore in high school, and had no clue.
No. And I don't think, once again, I don't know why you'd run and gun Animal Farm, but it's on the list.
Yeah. I don't understand it either.
But again, there's other things, like reading Henry Miller. Now, I didn't read Henry Miller till I was, 18, 19, 20. And Henry Miller's hard to deal with. But Norman Mailer, one of my many idols, is The Naked and the Dead. Mailer's novel after the Second World War is on this list. And the only thing I can think of is that it's an anti-war book, but it's Mailer's own experiences when he writes that. I don't know what you do with that stuff. Catcher in the Rye, Gatsby's on the list. Why?
I never got through Gatsby. I was supposed to, but I never got through that.
But I read all those guys. I read Big Deal. I read them, but Sophie's Choice is on the list. Satanic Verses. And I told Billy that's just out of fear.
Right. What are they going to do when kids have to read Nietzsche and
they won't.
Barth?
No, they won't.
And Camus. I mean, these guys had different ideas on everything.
No, sure. And Nietzsche changes me when I read him, and when you read Albert Camus, which we always said, I didn't know better because somebody said read this guy, and I thought his name was Chalmers. Seriously. I mean,
that's true.
Yeah,
don't feel bad. I've done that too.
Oh.
I've mispronounced many words.
Yeah, but I thought his name was Albert Chalmers, and somebody said, no. Wait a minute, it says Chalmers here, but that's But again, I go back to you can't tell a kid read satanic verses. And it's I've been through satanic verses and read it, but I never knew why he got the death threat put on him until you read the book, and you can see why these very structured mullahs would want to kill him for writing that book, because in their world, he's a heretic, and that's a death sentence. So maybe you read it for that reason, to find out what gets you killed in the Middle East, or what gets you killed by fanaticism. I don't know.
So I was going to wait till Saturday to give you a call, because I came up with another Tom's strange point. The reason why we should think of Joe Biden as a true person is because if the president, yesterday I was listening to some comedian or something that the vice president could go in and shoot the president, then pardon himself, and then the Speaker of the House could come in, shoot that person. And it goes, I'm sitting there saying, Joe Biden could actually set a hit on Donald Trump. The person who gets arrested identifies Joe Biden. He forgives him. He pardons him, so he's out of jail. Then he pardons himself, and Donald Trump's gone away.
Well, Joe Biden right now, and what's taking place in the Middle East, is just flat frightening. And
well, I agree with you there. There's got to be some, I understand retribution, and it goes so far.
No.
But what's going on now? They're destroying the whole entire country. Well, it'll be 30 years before that country is rebuilt. And these people are allowed to live in what used to be sanity before October 6th. And now it's just devastation.
Yeah. No, the world is turned, and a lot of it is the mainstream media is totally ignored these days, and people were reading the alternative press when it comes to the Palestinians and the Israelis, and at the same time watching Joe Biden retaliate and announce he is retaliating. Have they read nothing? Have they not looked at the last 30 years? Have they not watched Bush and Cheney? Have they not watched what's taken place? Or have they not read World War I, or they've not read things that lead them to believe? And no, they're not. Like I said, I'd be willing to bet $20 that George W. Bush never cracked a book on the history of Afghanistan. Never cracked a book. Never read one. And
well, I wanted to always ask you 2 points. Number one, the first point on this thing of Afghanistan about leaving, my first point to anybody was, why were we there in the first place?
Well, but it was beyond that, because the deal was made, the door agreement was made with the Trump administration, not with the government in Baghdad, or excuse me, in Kabul. The government, they made it with the Taliban. And they said, okay, give us a year. And when they crowed about no American GIs lost their lives, well, they had in essence, had a ceasefire. So the belief was going to be, like Kissinger getting the United States out of Southeast Asia, the belief was that the Afghan army would be able to hold long enough for the United States to have some sense of whatever it is to get out, like the Arvins did for Kissinger. Now, what happened? The Afghan army folded like a tent,
Just like Desert Storm, remember?
Sure, but that was different stuff. But that was the pretty much principally drafted army of Saddam. But in this case, the belief was that they would hold, but the deal was made in the Trump administration that they would leave on that date or before that date, and in fact they did. Biden did, but it collapsed like a tent on Biden.
Yeah.
But the belief was that this army that was left behind was going to be able to withstand the Talibs and ISIS and everybody that went, and and plus they threw their weapons in, they crossed over and everything that fell apart. And Biden, should he have known better? Was he abiding by the agreement? He's Joe Biden.
Yeah. But I always said that you can't win that war. It's a country run by a book. And that's it. And it's governed by a book, not by people. It's governed by a book. If you go against the book, you die.
The theology of nations. But you watch this stuff, and now I'm watching Joe Biden once again airstriking, and it's just asking for trouble.
I agree. Why are we in the South China Sea? Why are we in different waters? I don't know.
But it has to be, you ask yourself, everywhere the multinational corporation goes, the American military goes along with it. And you ask yourself the question, are we protecting the multinationals as they go abroad? And is that why, are we flying the flag over multinational corporations? And the answer is yeah. I mean, to a large degree, we truly are doing that. And
I agree.
And it's asking for trouble. So, all right. Thank you, Thomas. Good call. 303-696-1971. Banned books. Have you read any of them? There's a really lengthy list. And how did those books affect you? Did Catcher in the Rye affect you? Did Animal Farm affect you? Brave New World, Catch-22. I'm amazed at the books on the list. Rabbit Run, John Updike. I read all the Rabbit books. They were great. Naked and Dead. I mentioned Mailer's book. I met Mailer. It's a powerful book. Mailer's book. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. I think you know that story. Books I don't know. Their Eyes Were Watching God. I've not read that book. The Song of Solomon. I've not read that book. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Ken Kesey. I've read it. Met Kesey. Native Son. Richard Wright. Gone with the Wind. Margaret Mitchell. That's an interesting one. Slaughterhouse-Five. Kurt Vonnegut. Met Vonnegut. And what powerful books. Why don't we want them in our schools? Why don't we want them taught? Like I said, it's beyond me, and I don't think. I mean, if a kid's inquisitive enough to want to read Animal Farm, have at it. Please go for it. Enjoy it. Brave New World, Huxley's book. I read it, and it's about drugs. It does have a whole drug connotation to it. Catch-22, Heller's book. Catcher in the Rye, we talked about. Gatsby, we talked about. Why would you ban Gatsby? It's about, flamboyantly rich, Lucky Sperm Club members. Let me tell you, they're very rich. They're so different tonight. I always figured Tom and Daisy were the Clintons. I did. Remember they said that Gatsby writes that everywhere they went, they left, and I'm paraphrasing Gatsby. I'm paraphrasing Fitzgerald, writing through Gatsby, that everywhere that they went, they left destruction in their wake. And if you remember where it was Tom and Daisy, everywhere they went, they left trouble, left behind them in their wake were all these things that had gone wrong, and all these people whose lives they destroyed or hurt or injured. And I always thought that was the Clintons. Everywhere they went. And when they left damage. It's Tuesday. It's your turn. 303-696-1971. Billy Thorpe clearing calls. It's bad roads this morning, and I'll be back Saturday. And Billy's telling me to take a break. And also watching the Middle East and watching now the U.S. making airstrikes. It's crazy. 303-696-1971. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. George back tomorrow. Snow in the city the day after Christmas. Tuesday, December the 26th, 2023. A bunch of different topics out there. Let's go back to the phones to Ron. Ron, you're on a radio show. Good morning. Thank you.
Hi, Pete. Hey, first a comment, then a question. I just finished 1984 a few months back, and that book should be mandatory reading along with Animal Farm
But
in
both,
high school.
and that's my point, which I echo, but they're both on the banned list.
Yeah, where they ban those books seems to be kind of sporadic. It's not across the board, but
It's true.
I think any book that really reveals the manipulation and control of government through language and stuff should be mandatory reading. Books that are simply sexual, who cares about those?
I agree.
Here's my question. Have you seen Oppenheimer?
I have.
How do you think it compares the story on the screen to real life? Do you think that?
Yeah, parallels. It's obviously it's a Hollywood conditioning, but by and large, I thought it was pretty spot on.
Yeah, we just finished that last night, and it's an eye opener. It's pretty heavy though. I couldn't watch it in one sitting.
Well, he was who he was, and did you get to the part yet where they go into Harry Truman's office and Harry Truman, in essence, throws him out? That actually happened. I mean, Harry Truman said, he said, "You just made it. I dropped it." And he said, "No, I don't want to see him again." That was legit.
Yeah.
Harry Truman did that.
Get that crybaby out of my office.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But
Do you think there was one scene when they were detonating the bomb, and I think it was Edward Teller sits in a lawn chair, puts on sunglasses, and then coats his face with zinc, I guess, to protect him from the UV rays. I can't help but wonder if that really happened like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that, but Teller and Oppenheimer were enemies. And Teller is the one that says we can make the next bomb up, which was the hydrogen bomb.
Right.
And he convinces Harry Truman because Stalin has detonated their first atomic bomb. And Teller says, in essence, to Harry Truman, we can make a bigger bomb, a more threatening bomb. And Truman goes with that for Teller. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's just so frightening to see where this thing is headed, and it's not done yet.
What's interesting to me is and I'm reading a book right now that I can't finish because I'm reading all this other stuff, and it's on my table, and it's about the trials that took place in Japan after the Second World War, and they were quite different than the trials that took place in Europe after the Nazis. And the first third of the book is about internal politics inside of Japan leading up to Nagasaki and Hiroshima and what was going on the American side of that to make the decision to go ahead and use the bomb, or bombs, plural. And it's stuff I've never read before. And then they come down to, we have to try people. And of course, the emperor, they leave the emperor off the hook because it was a brilliant move, but he was still, he knew just about everything that was going on. As a matter of fact, he knew about Pearl Harbor before it happened. But different scenarios.
Well, they handled U.S. military and government handled that occupation of Japan very well, unlike some other things they've done. In the end, Oppenheimer is kind of a tragic figure. There is a documentary I haven't watched yet on Netflix based on his life, and it follows him to the end. I plan on seeing that, but I haven't yet.
Remember, they burn him, and UAC burns him, and he makes a comeback. But once again, the last caller was talking about left wing, or the caller before, but the country is very divided in the Great Depression. There were many, many people that had become Marxist or had become socialist, and Oppenheimer was one of them.
Mhm.
So many people, the Hollywood left, and academia, the left, people saw trade unionists as leftist. The sympathetic things that were taking place for Soviet Union, at all, and until it was revealed what a horrible human being Joseph Stalin really was. But the United States of America needed Joseph Stalin. They needed him to fight the Nazis.
Mhm.
And so the encouragement, but then this moment comes, and then there's McCarthyism, which I think we're seeing a lot of McCarthyism-esque behavior again today. But when they start in on, these guys were left of center, and they were Marxist, and they were socialist. Lucille Ball is just this great story, how they said there were people that they saved, and there were people that they didn't save.
Right.
And she was one of them. That was Dick Clark was saved in, the disc jockey scandals. There were people that went to prison. There were people that their careers were smashed, and Dick Clark's career was saved. And I watch it. We're watching it again today. Not everything, and nothing goes away.
Right. Yeah. Society picks winners and losers, and
we're back.
Yeah, and
we're back. I was going to say a different word that I can use, but in the Middle East, what has the United States military, what has U.S. foreign policy learned in the last 35 or 40 years or beyond? And here's Joe Biden now, military striking again inside the Middle East. What do these people think is going to happen?
Yeah. Well, his policies of I don't know, weakness and stuff. It could have all been prevented. I often wonder if Trump had won a second term, if we'd been in the same place we are now.
It's a great question.
And I'm not a Trump fan.
No, I understand. But Joe's got 2 carrier fleets there, and
yeah.
I don't understand the policy of going and getting back involved in something that had, in essence, chased you home once before.
Yeah.
And it's the fault of the civilians. It's Cheney, it's Rumsfeld, it's Wolfowitz, it's George Bush. And what did they really think was going to happen? Now, here's Joe, dicking around again. These guys are just waiting for you. They're waiting for you. They want that. They want that conflict. They want that war.
That military-industrial complex.
The machine. I think the war machine really. They're out now. So they need to get back into the game.
And now you've got the forces of the global warming industrial complex.
Oh yeah.
Gearing up.
I agree with you.
I'm glad I'm old, because I won't have to put up with it.
All right, here we go. 303-696-1971. There's nobody on the phones. You can join the show. 303-696-1971. Started out with 2 topics this morning. One was the banning the books, and I wanted to do this. I've been working on this idea, and I wanted to do it on a Saturday show, but this is the right morning to do it. And the other one is, what is the United States doing in the Middle East? Once again, go back, get involved in early firefights. Go back to Barbara Tuchman, reading about tripwire wars. Keep it up and see what happens. You already have problems in the Ukraine. Now you have problems here. How much can this country do again? And then in the idea of banning books, censorship, school boards and clergy, librarians, teachers, there seems to be more than enough. But banning is one of the most permanent and effective methods of censorship. They will not say censorship, and in fact, it's exactly what it is. And you have these challenges and then they progress until the book is no longer available to any student in a school, a library, a district. And we have been through this now for literally hundreds of years. Why? There doesn't ever seem to be anyone holding that line. But I spent a couple of days looking at lists of books that are on, in the eye of or in the bullseye to be banned. And it's scary. In 1984, an Animal Farm turned up many times. Satanic Verses, Bill and I were talking about that. Sophie's Choice, William Siren. Cat's Cradle. And I told you a story. I met Vonnegut. All he wanted to do was talk about Geraldo Rivera, who had been married to his daughter, who did the job on his daughter. He hated Geraldo. And I'm trying to get him to talk about Cat's Cradle and, all the other books that he had written. And he wanted to hammer on Geraldo. And I thought, okay, well, let him rock and roll. To Kill a Mockingbird makes the list. I think one of the most powerful of all books should be read every couple years. You should sit down and read it. Read To Kill a Mockingbird. And then Harper Lee comes back. You could build a career on this one book. That's all you had to do, is do that, and you're set. And she comes back with The Set of Watchmen. And it's a different view of who Atticus was, and it's not a pretty view of Atticus. James Joyce, Ulysses, who could understand it? It's like, how many times want to try and read Ulysses? Not really. Let me see. Lord of the Flies. William Golding's Lord of the Flies. I got the conch shell. You step back. 1984, George Orwell. Lolita is on the list. It's one of those, like the guy said, Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck. Tell me about the rabbits, George. Whew. Ooh. And let me see. Gatsby, A Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger's book. Naked Lunch. Again, reading Burroughs is tough. Women in Love, Lawrence, is tough. A Separate Peace, maybe. But they have to make that choice for you. 303-696-1971. Let me see what this one says. It sends me a cartoon summing up book banning. All right, Billy, get us out of here. 303-696-1971. Your turn right after this. Morning, everybody. It's a Tuesday, the day after Christmas, December 26th. Peter Boyles on the air everywhere, filling in for George. He'll be back tomorrow. 303-696-1971. Lines are open. It's been a good show. A lot of smart calls. Two topics. The one is U.S. foreign policy. Here we go again. The Biden administration has ordered a strike. First of all, there was a strike against U.S. forces apparently by this organization, an Iran-backed militant group, after the group used ballistic missiles to attack the U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq. And then the Bidens retaliate using a AC-130 gunship, and they make a claim that they killed a number of these people without killing any civilians. It's always, how would you know? But it's nevertheless. But they say they had a response, and they were in the air, and they were able to identify, and no civilians, which I always think is interesting to claim no civilians. But my initial thoughts and reaction were, here we go again. And what is it that these people have not learned? Why are we there? What is the purpose of taking the lives of these young Americans and putting them in this position? I don't understand, except if you understand it through the eyes of the war machine and making the claims. The United States is feeding Israel lots and lots of weaponry, lots of money, and there is an alternative view now. It is what we're watching, these demonstrations inside the country, pro-Palestinian. The United States has backed the Israelis to the hilt. Weaponry, airplanes, ammunition, all of it, money, all of it. Why must we be there? And what will come out of that? And nothing good. Have they learned anything from the Bushes? Have they learned anything from Poppy Bush or from George? Dick Cheney, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, just a series of lies. And the other one this morning is talking about banning books. And I've been working on this idea for a show for a while. And have you read the banned books? And I, in fact, have read many of them. And without knowing they were going to be banned, I was young enough when I started reading some of this stuff without realizing someday I'd be doing a radio show and explaining Animal Farm. But it's one of the books. And did any of those books really affect you? And so the great cartoon is, no one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. It's a great line. It's Linus talking to Lucy. And he's got a book in front of him. They're at a desk in school. And he said, no one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. It's pretty well said. And I was like, during the break, I just keep going back and looking at some of this stuff. A Brave New World, Huxley's book. That book affected me. It made me rethink some stuff. And it is now being challenged frequently because of, remember they use drugs in that book. Remember the Deepies? They go to the movies and he sticks it in his arm and he then becomes the cowboy. Heller's book, Catch-22, is clearly an anti-war book. Is that the reason? The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway, which I thought was okay. I'm not a giant Hemingway fan. A Farewell to Arms, Hemingway's book, which reflects a lot of what he had seen, although I just finished that Ernie Pyle book, and how much Ernie Pyle did not like Ernest Hemingway. He called himself, Ernest Hemingway challenged him as he was the real Ernie. Catcher in the Rye, Gatsby, we've been over all these. So how did they affect you? And have you read them? And what do you think the purpose of banning is? And once again, if we go back into what we're witnessing in the country today, it's like a vice that closes from both sides. We have the progressive left that continues to eat away from, they want history taught a different way. which some of it is revisionist and some of it's welcome, but a lot of it is what it turns out to be. And then on the other side is the right. And the right is, if you look at book bannings, principally, it is people on the right that want these books banned, although there are certainly people on the left that want to ban books as well. But when you look at literacy and education, maybe that's a better way to say this, censorship, including parents, school boards, lobbying groups, clergy, librarians and teachers, politicians, banning is one of the most permanent and effective methods of censorship. Begins with a challenge and then progresses until the book is no longer available to any student in the school, libraries, or in the district. And in many cases, the books are banned and petitioned to be banned by parents. And I wonder how many times the parents themselves have actually read the book, or they're going by what somebody else has to say. Billy Thorpe says the music's playing. 8:56. Hang on your hats. Your calls after this. Snow in the city. Be careful. Well, it is cold outside. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. Denver's talk station. Stay here. Tuesday, everybody. Good morning. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. He's back tomorrow, December the 26th. Nothing flatter than the day after Christmas. As you know, the weather is taking a turn. It's a lot of snow in the city. Roads are bad. Take your time. 44 is the alleged high. I don't know. See what happens. 31 tonight, 47 Wednesday, and on Thursday, 49 degrees. Back here on Saturday, and we missed an opportunity last Saturday to have Steve Harms on to talk about this film, the Iron Claw, and we're going to do it about the Von Erichs. 303-696-1971. Two topics. The one that's getting most of the attention is book banning, and like I said, I put some work in on this one. I was going to pull it off as a Saturday show, but this morning is good. And reading banned books. Have you read them, and how did they affect you? And what do you think it's about, the book censorship in the country? And it's growing larger and larger every day. So we begin with Don. Don, you're on a radio show. It's a Tuesday morning. Good morning.
Yes, I do want to talk about the subject of banned books, but a quick question. I kind of wanted to mention this on Saturday, but I think I used my calling card for the month. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, mentions the winter solstice, and they're kind of putting more emphasis on that. They're trying to shift America to that way of thinking. Do you and they claim that the Catholic Church and other Christians basically stole the solstice and made it Christmas. What is your take on that?
Well, there was only one church then, and extremely pragmatic. I asked the question on Saturday. It was a really good show. Is Christmas is it a pagan holiday? And
I was listening.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, the answer is of course it is.
Yes.
But the Christianity, the pragmatism of Christianity, that's almost brilliant, usurps much, if not all, of the things that swirled around pagan holidays and brought them into becoming Christian holidays, and it's what it is.
Did they steal? But did they steal the solstice?
Stealing it. The solstice is still the solstice. Astronomers know about it, and alternative religions, and it's important. It's an important day.
There's still a scientific aspect.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
But all I'm saying is FFRF is really stealing it because mostly that's just political propaganda on their behalf.
Well, no, but I think it's accurate, but it's like, so what?
Well, they're not saying a so what. I mean, they want to try to take its power. That's all I'm.
Well, but there's people trying to do all kinds of things. But it's really interesting to read that history because it's inaccurate, but it's also, it's also used, and they were brilliant in doing so.
And all I'm saying is, and I mean, we take stuff, we borrow stuff, we adapt stuff.
Of course.
A lot of rock and roll is adapted from other tunes.
Of course.
I mean, you have this Tate McRae rising from Canada. Her song "Greedy" was inspired by a song produced by Timbaland and Nelly Furtado called "Promiscuous."
And again, it took centuries for, remember there isn't any animals in the birth scene until Francis. Francis puts, there is no set date. And Julius the Pope, Julius sets the date. But those are, they're smart moves. They're really smart moves.
Yes. I mean, we don't really know when Christ came, and I think we do know that there was no room at the hospitality.
Well, it's a great story.
That's what we're going by the Bible, but we really don't know when Christ was born.
Actually, if you read the apostles, you don't get a sense of any of that, and it's all been added in and added on. It's I'm reading Paul and Paul's proclamations on homosexuality and the role of women, but he really is he's like other men of the Mediterranean area. He's like Romans. He's like Greeks. He's like Hebrew tribes. Women were they were subjugated, and so when he writes what he writes, he's only a man of his times writing those things. And when they talk about the role of women, that's used today in such a terrible way, but if you even go on and take and see what Islam does with women, it's not dissimilar. But remember, Paul is writing about his time, his
correct,
his place in the world.
But I mean, he also kind of writes about the family unit, and in the Christian faith,
sure,
the men must take the lead in bringing in the keeping the cultural staple.
But he's
speaking of cultural staple, I did kind of want to get into the subject, but those were biting questions because, like I said, you have big A atheists, as Mandy Connell likes to call them, that are really kind of using this to try to take its power. And I mean, they're really they're hardcore progressives.
But in many ways,
one of the big things that they're defending, and I'll take it to the book banning part of this, is these LGBTQ books like Flamer, Genderqueer, and all of that, and this is kind of, and I mean, there are parents that have read the books, and I think based on what they're saying, they're the equivalent of a XXX movie. And
but here we go again. When I spend a couple of days reading the books that I see that are under the gun are really modern classics, and I think that there's a lot of fear mongering. And these people, they're fringy. They can say what they want to say, but
who's the fringe? The parents or the or some of these?
And I've made a better word is alarmist. Why I hope that my grandson reads Sophie's Choice. I hope he reads Gatsby. I hope certainly Animal Farm or.
I mean, Animal. I mean. Certainly, I mean George. I think I take George Orwell over these books that I think basically are trying to enact revolution, in my humble opinion.
But
because Animal Farm, George Orwell was a socialist, but he wanted kind of gentler socialism, which I think is impractical. But at least there's still some insight from Orwell you can get.
Well, Orwell was a communist. He wasn't just a socialist, and he went to Spain in the Civil War, and he was injured, but he gets to see Stalin's communism up close and personal.
And he didn't like it.
Oh, of course he didn't like it. And that's the beginning of the change for Orwell. But
he wanted kinder, gentler socialism. That's what I was trying to say.
No, it's hard to determine who he comes out to be, because he writes these incredible books. I now for the fourth time this morning. The first time I read Animal Farm, I just thought there's this great novel. I didn't realize.
I've read Animal Farm. I haven't read his other books, but I did read Animal Farm.
But I didn't realize it was a critique. It was a parody, if you would, of Soviet Union, and I didn't know that. But I read. Animal.
Yes, I believe that.
Well, no, I mean, because when I read it, it was like, here, Pete, read this or something. However, I got turned on to it. But I read it and I thought it was really this remarkably funny, bitter novel. And when you realize that the pigs are Joseph Stalin, Khrushchev, the inner circle, Trotsky's Snowball, the old horse that's taken to the slaughterhouses, probably kulaks. It's just, they have the trials, and they remember the sheep bay, and it's all the, all the stuff that you later realize, hey, that was going on. But I certainly didn't know it at the time when I read it. Huxley, I don't know. When I read Huxley, and I thought, I didn't realize on what level Huxley was really coming across at you. But To Kill a Mockingbird's on many of these lists. The point of that, I don't know.
And I mean that's been on the for years, and that's
sure.
basically more on language and
well,
maybe not the overall message than the overall. Like
but
I
the
said,
message.
Again, it's language, it's content, it's world, maybe certain worldview, but not the overall message.
But the message of the book is to be, I don't know how you can overlook the message of the book because there is a word or two that's offensive. Don, I got to jump. I appreciate your call.
You have a happy New Year. Hope
Thanks,
to talk
brother.
to you again soon.
I promise. All right, we go to Mike. Hey, Mike, you waited. Good morning. You're on the radio show. It's a Tuesday.
Hey, good morning, Peter. How you
man,
doing?
I'm good.
Good. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I was kind of along the lines of your last caller here, but I got to thinking here about the subject of book banning. And, of course, I mean, I'm 75, and so I've read a lot of the books here that you have even come up that we've talked about. I kind of think that there's some things in the libraries today that go a little beyond the pale, but anyway, I mean, just interesting to know that the as far as book banning is concerned, the greatest book that ever has been written seems like it has ultimately been banned from most of our education system.
No, Bibles are still in schools. They're in school libraries.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing about it is you, in terms of, you don't read about some of these kids being sent home, from the principal's office for opening their Bible in school. And of course, I remember, back in the day when we said the Pledge of Allegiance.
You have to give me a case that I can look at where a kid got sent home for reading.
Well, I can't cite it exactly, but those things have come up in the news, from time to time.
That kind of thing I usually would see. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong, but there's scare tactics that are being used. One of the things and I was a prayer in school kid, and I suspect you were too at 75.
Sure.
One of the books that's banned is Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie's book. I think that's banned out of fear. I think that the retaliation that possibly could come, it keeps that book out of school libraries. But I don't know, like we were Pledge Allegiance kids, we were school prayer kids, we were, I don't know if you were in that when teachers could hit you. I don't know if you were part of that, but I was.
You didn't. You got your shirt tucked in, and you didn't chew gum at school.
No. I have a really good friend who's teaching now, retired from another job, and he's teaching. And he was the man for a long time, and he said he tells me stories, but I went through all of that stuff. You did as well. I don't know if I think the Bible got read first.
Yeah.
And then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, there didn't seem to be a fear of the Bible that it seems like there is, and
I don't know if it's fear. I don't know if it's fear. I think, again,
well, I think it's more of a situation of our society today is trying to antisepticized our culture from, the Bible. And one of the things, the books that comes to mind, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, a pastor by the name of John Ortberg, and he wrote a book called Who Is This Man?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about Jesus and the life of Jesus, and how that isn't an interesting phenomenon that my birthday and your birthday is dated from the life of this man who was insignificant as he seemed to be.
Well, now, BC now and AD, and they call it before the Common Era, which is probably makes more sense because there's a large part of the world that is not Christian. And if you're going to put history dates on something and you call it the Common Era. So BC would be before the Common Era. They mark that date, but it's some of the stuff always makes sense on some level. But that's where, if there's a Chinese guy reading history, and then now he takes another understanding. I don't know where all of this ends up. I sincerely don't. Book censorship in this country, to me, scares the hell out of me.
Yeah,
it really does.
Well, that's interesting. Doing studying a lot about the founding of the country in the early days and the Pilgrims, and how so many of the great Ivy League institutions actually became and were founded by
religious groups. Absolutely.
Protestant preachers to teach people how to read, and the Bible was the thing they used as the textbook.
They were all trained. They read the classics, and they read them in Greek. They read them. They read them in Latin. They were influenced by Greek philosophers. They were influenced by. There was so much influence. Like take Jefferson, who I'm a geek about Jefferson. Jefferson's Bible, he removes all references to Jesus from the Bible. Now, a woman put out some book that wasn't true, and that book's nonsense. It's called Jefferson's Bible. I actually have a copy of it. And there were other people that thought other things, but their intention was part of, you can believe whatever you want to believe, and that's Jefferson's. No national church. He feared a national church. He saw what national churches did in Europe and feared one. So, these guys are a lot smarter than certainly the people who are running it today.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, I'm watching.
Well, it's just interesting to me the world over. I'm back to that book I was talking about. It's an interesting read. If you haven't ever read it, it'd be worth your time. But anyway, it talks about the fact that how did one individual's life, whether a person is a Christian believer or not, how is it that life had so much influence universally? You go to places and the towns and so forth, like Russia, St. Petersburg. All over the world. There was such an impact and influence by one individual, and it's almost uncanny, And so, and even on the subject, where you talked about how that, a lot of people think Paul the Apostle was against women and he repressed.
He was a man of his time.
He goes into this book and he talks about the fact that in reality, the Bible did more to give women a place of equal footing in society today than any other religion ever has.
Well, it took a while, anyway, but Paul, who gets condemned, and so I got interested in his life, and I read his life, and and he's a man of his time. We use that, and so to critique him like critiquing Columbus or critiquing without realizing, Columbus is just a man of his time, and you apply 2023 principles to this guy. In the 15th century, you're going to come up short. And the same thing. And I realized that Paul, who's, like I said, they weaponized Paul, but he's just they called him a Mediterranean, like the whole area around the Mediterranean. That's what, regardless of, they could say, well, a Christian, no, it had nothing to do with that. He was simply a man of his time, believing what they believed about women. That's all.
Right.
Nothing else, nothing more. And so I don't know, when stuff gets twisted and turned into what it gets twisted and turned into.
Yeah. Well, the greatest thing about Paul that seems like sticks out in my mind from all of my study, and I've studied the Bible. I try to read through it every year, but anyway, his example of his experience on the Damascus Road is the greatest thing. And I read something, I don't know what happened to the magazine, but it was U.S. News and World Report. I don't
No,
think it's been around for a lot of years,
no.
has it?
It-
But I
so-
read an article one time in there, and it said that one of the greatest things that happened in world history is the missionary journey of the Apostle Paul. And I thought that's quite a phenomenal statement from a writer in a magazine like the U.S. News and World Report. But
there are people that that appear, and they in modern day, and as we speak, I just finished that Musk book, and I'm reading a book on Bezos, and there are people, Picasso, Jefferson, I mean Einstein, they appear, and why do they appear? Why are they here? What is it that they do? And you put that, you have to have him on the list. Paul has to be on the list, but they just, I'm so impressed by how these guys really rethink the world. And when they do, they seem to have lasting impact. Even people that are on the other side of the ledger, that have done what they did, and they leave that lasting, you can put the Fuhrer over there, you can put Joe Stalin over there. I mean, but they have had a tremendous impact. I'm not that smart.
Well, it's interesting to me that the book continues to be the best-selling book in the whole world, and not without some good reason. And so,
but
anyway,
again,
it's been enjoyable.
You too.
Enjoyable to
Good.
talk to you. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you, sir. You too. 303-696-1971. Final hour, the George Brauchler Show, 27 after the hour. 44 will be the high. I'm Peter Boyles. 303-696-1971. Have you read a banned book? And the list is pretty lengthy. Billy's read all of the Harry Potter books. I've not read one of them. So there are places that ban Harry Potter because of witches and all the stuff and wizards that go with that. I've not read those, but I certainly read Cat's Cradle, Vonnegut's book, and that's banned. So 303-696-1971. It's your turn.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
Morning, everybody. I'm Peter Boyles in for George. George back tomorrow morning. It's Tuesday, 26th of December, 2023. Roads are rough. The claim is 44 will be the high. We can only hope. 303-696-1971. Back to the phones we go. We go to Nick. Thanks for waiting, Nick. Good morning. You're on the show.
Thanks for taking my call, and I want to thank you for being on the air, because you're one of the few people that actually knows how to read and reads a book once in a while. so you bring a little perspective to things. My major concern is that Joe Biden, who's a complete idiot, is going to stumble into a war.
Yes.
He won't know what to do.
Agreed.
And whatever he does will be all the wrong moves.
You ask yourself, have these people learned anything?
No, nothing.
I don't think so either. First of all, we had 3 U.S. service members were wounded. The first question you ask is, why were they there in the first place?
I understand there's still 2,500 troops in Iraq.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, what are we doing there? What the hell are we doing there?
Well, the whole invasion of Iraq, Dick Cheney and George Bush they're war criminals. For what?
Yes, they are.
So are Wolfowitz and Card and all of them. They invented a war that didn't have to be. They lied the United States into that. And in Iraq, we've talked about that this morning, but there's supposed to be a government that's left alone in Baghdad. But there's this drone attack, and keep it up. And I'm sure everybody's aware. Keep it up and see what eventually happens. Because I watched some Congress guy on Fox early this morning. Oh, we need to attack them more. I've got an email about we need to do this and need to do that. No, we don't. We collectively need to get out of there. These people they've had enough. How many more Iraqis do you think that? And one thing for sure, my sidebar is, if Saddam Hussein were alive, and I'm not defending Saddam, a lot of the crap that happened in Israel in October would have not happened.
No, it wouldn't have. He would have put a quick stop to that nonsense.
Yeah. And now the Iranians are unbridled. They don't have any opposition. Saddam was their opposition. Saddam was our guy when the so-called War of the Cities between Iran and Iraq. The United States was helping Saddam. And now where do we sit? Well, Bush and Cheney overthrew Saddam for no reason. And I'm not defending Saddam, but what they did is unforgivable. And notice that you don't see a lot of interviews being done with George Bush or Dick Cheney.
No. What do they have to say? Nothing.
They can't. And they it's like the 9/11 Commission and all the different things, the aspects of all of that. And you wonder, what is it? Is it the war machine again that wants to go back in and start it up again and have another war? But this time, I don't know what the fallout would be.
Well, the fallout would be unpredictable, because these events have a nasty tendency of taking on a life of their own.
You bet.
And they spin off into directions that nobody anticipated.
Well, it escalates. It's and again, I use Barbara Tuchman and what she said about World War I, and then they talked about tripwire wars that keep it up, and finally you're going to trip over the one wire that's going to be the one that starts it, really fires it up. And things like what happened yesterday, and they sent in the gunships and they attacked this, and they're in Iran, and they're in Iraq, but it's an Iranian-backed militant group. And then they proclaim, oh, we killed all of them. We didn't kill any civilians. First of all, how would you know that you didn't kill any civilians?
They don't.
Of course they can't. And they called a self-defense strike. But you're there, and there's nothing standing in the way of the Iranians now. There is no
No.
buffer. There's no one standing there. And they've this terribleness that continues in Gaza. And all you're doing is creating more and more enemies for everybody.
Well, from what I understand is that the sanctions that were put in place by the previous administration have never been revoked. All Biden has to do is to enforce them. And it's primarily the export of oil, which is the number one income source for the Iranians that fuels all this. Now, he could enforce that without too many problems, but won't do it.
But the Europeans will buy that oil. I mean, it's the Chinese will buy that oil. It's not
well, anyway, it's just, I just think that these people are way over the head, and it's a classic example of when things get rough, start a war somewhere to divert everybody's attention. And it really will boil down to how many Americans fall for that nonsense.
Well, you would hope. One of the things I think that is happening, that I'm watching happen, is now with all the alternative sources of information, that there was that time where it was, the big three, the networks, a couple of newspapers that really held sway. Well, now, anybody can sit down, myself included, you, everybody, and you can read all the alternative streams of information that, whether or not, a lot of it contradicts what the nightly news says or contradicts Sean Hannity on Fox. And Fox has enough problems already being jammed up for telling lies on the air about Dominion. So it's right now, the plates of the earth are shifting on how people get their information or how they judge the rest of the world. And some kid with a computer accesses more information right now than FDR got during the Second World War. I mean, they were days behind when he would be told things. I don't know. I don't know, but it's changed, and it is changing more rapidly than you and I can get. I'm an old man, then we can get a handle on it.
Well, as you well know, history has a nasty habit of surprising you,
and surprising you, and telling you the truth if you want to listen.
Right.
If you want to listen,
That's right.
Good.
And unfortunately, we don't have the A team in power right now. We don't even have the B team.
Yeah, but I would wonder, isn't there somebody standing around Joe Biden and telling him, Joe, for God's sake, don't do this, because it's going to go to a very, very, very bad place. And it's going to go quicker than you think.
Exactly.
And I think that, I don't know. I mean, I watch Joe Biden at a distance like everybody else. You hear a lot of people talk about who's in charge, who calls these shots, but they're being braggadocious this morning about using those AC-130s and to strike. I'm thinking, no, don't. You already got tons of problems with what's taking place in Gaza. You got tons of problems in Ukraine. What is it about this administration? I don't know.
Well, from an outsider looking in, my reaction is very simple. They don't know what they're doing, and they're basically stumbling from crisis to crisis, and then they try to stick some Band-Aids on the problem, hopefully in the hope that things will die down.
It's not going down this time. No.
Well,
the ME right now, the Middle East right now, and it really does begin with what Bush and Cheney did. And it moves forward from Bush and Cheney. And
yes, they stirred up the pot, and they disturbed the status quo, which was very tenuous to begin with, but at least it was a status quo. Now we have chaos.
Absolutely. And had they not, and they in essence got away with it. The Bush and Cheney got away with it. There are very few places they're critiqued. And most people talk, wow, what a great job. No, it was the worst possible thing. And it's like Hillary Clinton talking about Arab Spring. Arab Spring was Arab Winter, and the things that they wanted. And the best place people can handle with the Middle East is just to stay away from it, because we don't have an understanding of it. We don't have a grasp of it. And now, of course, what's taking place in Gaza, now what's taking place back inside Iraq. And somebody's going to say, well, we need to strike Iran. I listened to that on talk radio. I listened to that. That's insanity. Let's expand the war and attack Iran. You have any idea what happens then? The relationships between the Russians and now the Russians and the Chinese are friending up. And pardon me, who does? Who does?
Well,
I'm sorry, I was going to say
who
by
should
Vec
really
advocates for attacking Iran.
Oh, wow.
It's one of his platforms and foreign
Fools.
policy.
They're fools. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
The person who really got screwed was Colin Powell, because he was lied to.
Yep.
He put his integrity on the line in
Yes,
front
he
of the
did.
UN, and they yanked the rug out from underneath
I
him.
agree. What that job was done on Colin Powell, and
That's exactly right.
And it was Wolf. That was a Wolfowitz deal, and that guy that and it was Wolfowitz. Come on, Peter. Scooter Libby, and those guys.
Scooter Libby.
And then of course they pardoned. They didn't pardon Scooter Libby. That Dick Cheney went to W and said, ask him to pardon Scooter Libby, and W didn't do it. But they just did the job. The defense secretary, they did what they did. And were they after the oil? Were they after whatever they were after? Was it really because he threatened George W.'s father? I mean, you hear all these stories about why they decided to go after Saddam, but in fact they did, and they set the entire Middle East on its ear, and it hasn't come back. And now look at
the one thing that we Americans need to learn is that there are certain areas of the world we need to stay away from because we don't understand them, and they don't see the world the way we see the world, or the Western world sees the world.
But this morning we sit on one because, believe me, when the mullahs aren't just going to sit there and not do anything about this, they're going to figure out another way to be underhanded again, and then it's you can't win it. Appreciate your call. Thank you. We're coming up on time, everybody. 303-696-1971 is our phone number. To the wall of shame. Clinton and Obama destroyed Syria. The fight in Syria was always that one that the United States decides that Assad, who is the head of, is his father then, and Assad he was pro the West. He really was. And then they forced his hand and should have left him alone. He's still in power. He's still there. Assad is still there. Is he brutal? Oh, absolutely. Are they all brutal? Yes, absolutely. 303-696-1971. Have you read a banned book and realized that did you ever think to yourself, I should have never read that? Of course not. You read those books and they changed how you thought, or you learned something from them. But the banned book list is really extensive, and the people that want these books banned. And how did you read? Can you imagine? I can't, I mean, I can, in a negative way, I can't think of a banned book that affected me in a negative way. 710 KNUS 44 will be the high, 47 tomorrow. George is back tomorrow. I'm Peter Boyles. This is Radio Free Denver. Good old 710 KNUS. We got about 6 minutes left in the show. Good morning. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. He's back. And on Saturday mornings, we do our show at 9 o'clock. It's cold outside, and now it's cold outside, and snow still kicking around. We'll see what happens. 710 KNUS, thank you, and good morning, everybody. With a couple minutes left, this idea of banning books is, it's very frightening to me. And if you stop and think about, and this list is extensive, how many of those books have you read? Now, this is a really interesting, and I like it a lot. Banning books only influenced me to read them. There you are. I mean, when the church put Lady Chatterley's Lover on they had films or movies you shouldn't see and books you shouldn't see. I immediately, and I had to find, I don't even know how I got my hands on a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover and The Gamekeeper, right? I read it, and he writes these strange ways of writing about sex that and I read them to other kids. What does this mean? And we can, I still remember some of the things he wrote, how they said it, but it didn't make sense to me. So I kind of let it go, but this is absolutely correct text. Banning books only influenced me to read them. And when somebody said you can't, and we have a running gag, my brother and I have a running gag that we grew up pretty close to the Allegheny River, and my mother's warning every morning during, we were still younger guys before we went to work, but she would say, stay away from the river. Well, where's the first place we would head? With all of our friends, we would go to the river, and you could catch fish and you could swim in the river. Although looking back on that, you wonder why, but it's same thing with born and raised in a briar patch. Remember Bear Brer and Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. And he said, Brer Rabbit kept saying, whatever you do, don't throw me in the briar patch. And so the fox and the bear decided, let's huck him into the briar patch. And what does he turn around and say? I was born and raised here. I was born and raised in the briar patch. So maybe that may be the sent in text of the morning. Banning books only influences me to read them. But when you look at the list, I'm astounded by these books that have made so much sense in my life. All right, Brauchler's back here tomorrow. I'm Peter Boyles, and I will see you on Saturday. We're going to relook at the Iron Claw about the Von Erichs. Billy, thanks. And you guys take care of yourselves. Good show, great calls, smart people. I'll see you Saturday, and George is here tomorrow. Have a good morning.